Hello, folks. This is Dr. Taylor, and I'm going to share a little bit about week 4, a final research proposal. I think this will be especially helpful for people who have some concerns. I don't know what level all of you are at as far as research. I know you talked a little bit about it in the discussion board. Some of you are more comfortable, some of you are experts, some of you are developing, and some of you are, I'm not sure what the heck's going on. So I really do think that this will be helpful. So this week we're looking at a couple of things. First of all, we're looking at 2 discussion boards, and at the end of the week, you'll be looking at the quantitative methods section research draft. So within the discussion boards, the first discussion board focuses on data analysis research critiques. Now, what we're doing here is you're actually looking at some analysis that was developed from a table. The actual research isn't important. The idea is that you are able to identify the significant findings. The first and foremost thing you want to look at is p-value. Now you'll notice here it says missing information p-value. What that means is right here there's a p-value. There should have been a 0.05. And what that means is, well, first of all, p-values run between 0 and 1, meaning that 0.05 is an extremely significant finding, meaning that less than 5% of the population would be affected, involved, or whatever the situation is with your research question, and that's good, because then you're almost at a perfect score, versus 0.48, which means that upwards of 48 people would not respond to the treatment, etc. That would be poor findings. That would be really poor significance. So that's how you would discuss research findings, whether they're significant or not significant, whether you would accept them or reject them. In fact, in your discussion post, I included a thread in both discussion board 1 and discussion board 2. In discussion board 1, the question, as you can see in this right here, it discusses demographics. It talks about, and here's standard deviation, the population for the actual control group and the experimental group. The experiment was music. And you're looking at the different findings, the different demographics of the findings. That's how you're supposed to be reading this particular table. You're looking at all the what did they actually call them? Categories. You're looking at the categories and you're looking at the different findings. Now, I'll just give you a hint. Other than this first p-value, the rest of them really are not significantly statistically significant. So that would be a good hint moving forward. So in your thread, I gave you a little more information on how you would determine that. I talked a little bit about standard deviation, and you don't have to know how to do these tables and all, but I just want you to see what that means when you're looking at standard deviation. So in here they're looking at IQs, right? So the mean IQ is 100. When you're looking at standard deviation, if you deviate plus or minus 1 on either side, that would be 68 of the population. And 34% probability that that would happen. That's a good standard deviation, okay? And you come out a little further to plus or minus 2. Here you go, 14%, and that's still okay. And then you might have a few more in the 2% range, and these people might have here you go, 145, super smart people here, so sad, not so smart people. And then you get your little outliers. Well, actually, you want to be in this range here. So when you see your plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, that's what you're looking at when you're looking at the bell curve with standard deviation. And that's actually what this number shows us when we're looking at the parentheses, okay? So it's showing you what your standard deviation is. And then I give you a little explanation on how you can determine statistically significant findings. Now, these are not the best findings, but it does tell you where the data sits on a bell curve and how you can determine whether that was good or bad, or are they just outliers, what's the probability, or did that just happen by chance that these people occurred in this particular situation. That's what you're looking for. Think of terms of probability, think of terms occurring by chance, think of terms of statistically significant. These are all the things you're going to look at when you're looking at these different values. You have to understand the p-value. I just went through it, and read this again. Now, I gave 2 really cool videos. These are separate than for what's in your module. They're very brief. They're to the point. I always put extra videos after the fact because these help bring the points home. And especially for those of you who need a refresher, these videos are fabulous. Also in that particular point, you notice they talked about heterogeneity and homogeneity. Well, when we look at this question, when you're thinking about those two terms, you're looking at variability. How much variability is in those particular findings? And you want to read your book. I actually give you the pages that you can zero in on, and you're going to consider the variability, look at similarities or differences. Now, in question 2, you're actually looking at p-value, and they're asking you to locate and discuss statistically significant findings. And they gave you particular categories that they want you to look at. Cardiac stimulation, satisfaction, and so forth. So you can see the different categories of the population, mean, standard deviation, median, but here I want you to focus on the p-values. Okay, so look at them. Are they significant? Think about what I just said, and then look at these values, watch the video, go back and look at these values, and you'll be able to make an academic determination and have a nice discussion on that particular situation. Now, in the discussion board 2, the same thing. What I included was the, let's see if this will bring me back to the whole discussion board. Yes, it does. Yay. What I did was I included a little bit more information for you for statistical tests. Here is my thread. So what you want to do is look at the selecting statistical test for your research. Wonderful, wonderful YouTube video. Again, brings all the points home, even though there's fabulous videos in Module 4. As a matter of fact, there's one website video that you're going to have to look at referring to G-Power, and you'll have to download the software just to dig into that. But I also included a worksheet. There's 2 worksheets here. I'll bring up one worksheet. Excuse me, this is the proposal. Here's the worksheet. Selecting the correct statistical test. After you watch the video, I would look at these 8 questions. They're really good questions. They're very primary, and it really focuses on everything that we're talking about in Module 4, and it'll help you understand why the tests are important, why p-values are important, why sampling is important, what kind of test would work best, and guess what? The good news is I also included an answer sheet. So after you go through them and you figure out what the test you were going to use, you can go back and test yourself. Did I choose the right test? What was the explanation? I included a detailed explanation, so it'll help you understand what you're reading in your text, what you're seeing in the modules, and so forth. So please don't be discouraged. Don't be alarmed if you don't understand something. That's why we're learning this. If you understood this, you wouldn't need the course. You could have clipped out of it. And in this particular section, you're going to use your quantitative research proposal paper, if I can find it. Here it is. And it keeps talking about, you see the term section 3. Well, section 3 research methodology, I'm going to go through this in a minute. This is what the actual assignment's referring to, and you're going to submit this assignment in the discussion board on week 6-1 for feedback from your peers. So let's open that assignment up now. Oh no, you know what? Let me talk about one more thing. In your Pollitt and Beck, there's also a section when you first open up the book. Oh, wait, where's my... Hold on. Okay, I wanted to make mention to this too. This isn't the exact table that's in your Pollitt and Beck text. However, when you first open the Pollitt and Beck text and turn over the first page, you'll see the pyramid, the systematic review type pyramid, evidence-based practice. But next, you will see the quick guide to bivariate statistical test. And what I want you to know is that test is similar to this table, and it shows you the different type tests that are available for the different categories that you have. I have also attached a PowerPoint that I developed in the Learning 4 modules, and I didn't want to put all this information in too soon because there's so much stuff you have to look at and view, and I want you to take it step by step for the statistical test. However, this is listed several times in the PowerPoint, and it really focuses on, this is a little tough to see. But you can see the different categories of what you're using, and then you can decide what type test you want to use by the type of sample um, that derives from your PICO, your research question. So I want you to know that this is inside your Module 4. And of course, know that you'll learn from each other this week, so I'm not expecting there to be a right or wrong with your choice of statistical test. This is actually a learning activity throughout this week. So let's look at our quantitative research proposal paper and see where we are at this point in time. Throughout this course, we talked about moving through the different parts, and we have. Little, unbeknownst to you, or you probably didn't even realize it, you have already moved on to section 3 to this week. So you started out with your title page, and in your introduction, you started out with your research problem, your PICO question, your problem statement. You developed a hypothesis. We looked at it. We revised it. You have a more specific question now. You did a literature review. You looked at the different confounding variables. You decided what terms were important for your research. How will you measure the outcomes? Theoretical frameworks. We looked at that in discussion 2. Last week we did review of the literature. I gave you revisions, I gave you comments, and you're going to continue to look at the literature. And interestingly, this week, once you look at the different statistical tests and understand how to understand findings, how to interpret findings, you may even decide that your literature isn't that great, because you might say, wow, look at these p-values. I'm not sure if I want to use that literature. Or you can say that that's weak literature, and that can be actually a defense for you to consider more research. So I just want you to know that that's really important in regard to how you're focusing on statistical analysis. So understanding research design, sampling, data collection, and analysis brings us to section 3. This is the section that you're going to be focusing on at the end of the week for the draft that you're going to submit to discussion board 6. In that discussion board, there's only one discussion board, which is good, and all that is feedback from each other. You will have already done all this work, and you're going to get feedback to revise for your final project. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. In this particular section, you're going to look at methodology. We talked about design last week. We talked a little bit about data collection, inclusion and exclusion criteria. You saw how I mentioned that in your lit review, and that's huge to move forward with your methodology. You're going to talk about how you're going to recruit your samples, the sample size, the G powers in Module 4. That's the module you'll download the software to determine your G power. Sample selection, it's very easy, by the way. And human subjects. Remember, human subjects is huge. That's a big ethical situation when you're thinking of the Institutional Review Board, and that's something that you're going to go through in week 6. Then, of course, the data collection, where, what, when, where, and how, and this will establish, well, essentially, we're trying to establish rigor in reliability and validity of your findings. We're going to look for potential or known limitations. And this I don't think will be necessary, because by the end of this particular week, I think you'll be very, very comfortable in section 3. Section 3 is essentially the nuts and bolts. I'll be talking more about section 4 in your references and appendix next week, because then we'll be getting close to the final project. So this week I want you to focus on statistical analysis, look at section 3, read through these really important bullet points, because this is going to be all part of your methodology section. I have addressed much of this in your module 4. The discussion boards will help you greatly. And lastly, please take a deep breath. Please know that we will get through this. You will get through this. This is actually a fun learning experience. Once you understand the process, it kind of just lights up and a whole new world opens. So stick with me, stick with your peers, and I think you will all be much more informed research consumers by the end of this module. Okay, thank you, and see you in the course room.